When we hear about these massive scandals, think Enron or big-time cheating in sports, it's pretty easy to just point fingers at a few really bad people, right? A couple of bad apples. But what if that's not the real story? What if the line between being honest and dishonest is actually way, way thinner than we think? Okay, let's get into the surprising psychology of why we all cheat.
So let's start with the big one, the central question. Why do good people, people like us, sometimes cheat? The common sense answer seems pretty straightforward. You just weigh the pros and cons and you make a rational call. But as we're about to find out, the real reason is so much more fascinating, and it has almost nothing to do with a simple calculation. So the old school way of thinking about this is something economists call the simple model of rational crime, or SMORC for short. The whole idea is that we're basically all walking calculators of crime. We do a quick cost-benefit analysis in our heads. If the reward for cheating is big enough and the chance of getting caught is small enough, well, we go for it. Simple as that. And this quote, it just perfectly captures how kind of ridiculous that model is. It actually comes from a story about a guest lecturer who was telling business students that, hey, getting rich by cheating is a simple game. He asks, what are the pros? And they all yell, you get rich. He asks, and the cons? You get caught. And he's like, but there's only a chance you'll get caught. That's the SMORC model in a nutshell. But the real question is, does it actually hold up? Well, it turns out not so much. Not even close, actually. When researchers put this idea to the test in actual experiments, that whole simple model of rational crime just completely fell apart. Instead, they found something way more subtle, way more human going on. A little voice inside all of us that they nicknamed the Fudge factor. Okay, so get this. Here's the first bombshell from their experiments. When people are given a crystal clear opportunity to cheat for money with zero chance of getting caught, almost everybody does it. In one experiment, they paid people for every math problem they said they solved, and then let them shred their own answer sheets. And the result? Yep, cheating was everywhere. But, and this is the part that changes everything, people didn't cheat by a lot. They didn't go crazy and claim they solved every single problem to make the most money. Nope, they only cheated a little bit, just enough to give their earnings a small boost, but not so much that they'd feel like a terrible person.
This chart shows it perfectly. So, on average, people were actually solving about 4 of these math problems, but they told the researchers they solved 6. Now think about it. If that whole rational SMORC model was right, that claimed score bar would be through the roof. People could have easily said they solved 10 or 20, but they didn't. So, what's holding them back?
And this is where the fudge factor theory comes in. It's this brilliant idea that we're all constantly trying to balance two things that are completely at odds. On one hand, yeah, we want the benefits that come from cheating. But on the other hand, we really, really want to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and see a good, decent person. So what do? We cheat, but only up to our personal fudge factor, that invisible line where we can still tell ourselves a story that makes us feel good about who we are. Okay, so we've all got this internal brake on our dishonesty, but what happens when something pushes on it? It turns out our fudge factor isn't set in stone. There are all these powerful psychological forces out there that can actually stretch it, making us cheat more without us even realizing what's happening. Let's take a look at a few. We're gonna dive into 3 of these hidden forces. First up, the sneaky power of conflicts of interest. Then we'll look at what happens when our moral muscle just gets worn out, something called mental fatigue. And finally, a really weird one, how wearing fake designer stuff can actually make us more dishonest. All right, let's start with conflicts of interest. Picture this. Your dentist goes out and buys a super expensive, brand new machine for making crowns. All of a sudden, he starts looking in your mouth and noticing that those little craze lines, these tiny, harmless cracks in your enamel, are now a huge problem that needs a crown right away. Now, it's not because he's suddenly a bad guy, it's because his brain has been unconsciously swayed by this really powerful incentive to pay off his shiny new toy. And this is the classic dilemma, isn't it? On one side, you've got what's best for the patient, and on the other, you have the professional's own financial interests. Even the most well-meaning, ethical people get influenced by this conflict, and a lot of the time, they don't even know what's happening. Their judgment just gets colored. Next up, mental fatigue, or what psychologists have a great name for, ego depletion. I want you to think of your self-control like a muscle. Every single time you resist a temptation, you say no to that cookie, or you force yourself to finish a boring report, you're flexing that muscle, and it gets a little more tired. The more you use it, the weaker it gets, which makes you way more likely to give in and do something dishonest later on when you're just plain exhausted. And now, for the one that sounds totally bizarre. In some experiments, people were given fake designer sunglasses to wear, and those people cheated way more on a task later on than the people who were wearing the real deal. So what's going on? Well, wearing something fake seems to make us feel like fakes ourselves, like imposters, and it damages our self-image just enough that we start to think, what the hell, and just toss our moral standards out the window. It's a slippery slope that can start with just one little inauthentic act.
So this all might sound a little discouraging, right? That we're so easily pushed towards being dishonest. But here's the really cool part. The reverse is also true. Just like small forces can make us cheat more, some incredibly simple nudges can shrink our fudge factor and make us dramatically more honest. And researchers have found a few of these that are shockingly effective. We're talking about things as simple as asking people to just think about a moral code, or having them sign an honor pledge, or even just changing where they put their signature on a form. It sounds small, but it can make a huge difference. Okay, let me walk you through one of the most famous experiments on this. They took a group of people and split them in two. Right before giving them that same math test where they had the chance to cheat, they asked one group to write down 10 books they read in high school. They asked the other group to try and write down as many of the 10 commandments as they could remember. The results were just mind-blowing. The group that recalled the books, they cheated. You know, same as before, a little bit, but not a ton. But the group that was simply asked to think about the 10 commandments, they didn't cheat. At all. Not a single person. And get this, it was true even for the people who couldn't remember a single commandment. Just the act of trying to access that moral part of their brain completely wiped out the cheated. $0. That's how much money that group stole. It cost absolutely nothing to do, and it was 100% effective at stopping dishonesty in that moment. It just goes to show, you don't always need these big, scary punishments. Sometimes a simple, timely reminder is all it takes.
And here's how this plays out in the real world. In another study, an insurance company just moved the signature line on a claim form. They moved it from the bottom to the very top. So now people had to sign the statement, "I promise the information I'm providing is true," before they filled out all their info. The result? People suddenly reported driving way fewer miles than when they signed at the end. That signature right at the beginning worked like a perfectly timed moral wake-up call.
So after all of this, what's the big picture? What does it all mean? Well, it tells us that dishonesty isn't really about some cold, rational calculation. It's about something much deeper, something that's fundamental to being human, our incredible capacity for storytelling.
Neuroscientists have actually shown that a part of our brain acts like an interpreter that's constantly spinning stories to make sense of our actions. There was this classic study where women were asked to pick their favorite pair of stockings out of 4 identical pairs. Most of them picked the one on the far right. But when asked why, they all came up with these perfectly logical-sounding reasons. Oh, it was the texture, the sheen, the quality. They had no idea the real reason was just its position on the table. Their brain just invented a story to explain the choice. And this quote, this is really the heart of it all. When we cheat, but only by a little bit, our internal storyteller just kicks into high gear. It cooks up a story that justifies what we did, a story that we like, a story that lets us continue to believe that we're good people. We literally rationalize our dishonesty by telling ourselves a story where we're still the hero. And so that kind of leaves us with one last thought. We are all wired this way. We're all master storytellers. The forces that push us toward dishonesty are subtle, they're powerful, and most of the time, they're invisible. But understanding them gives us a choice. So, knowing that your brain is a brilliant storyteller, ready to justify almost anything, the only question left is, what story are you going to consciously choose to live by?